All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We are here with some Zowe core committers, Sujay Solomon and Mike Bauer. My name. If you are, if you joined in, can you please mute yourself unless you have a question?
No, I haven't.
We're getting a little bit of background noise. Right. Thank you. And what we would like to talk about today is how to contribute to the Zowe community. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn it over to Demet, who is one of the facilitators for this, and ask her to just give a brief introduction and maybe provide us with a few words on what value you see from the Zowe community in terms of the new graduates that we are talking to today.
Tim, can you just mute all? I think people might not know where to mute. So just if you can mute it from your end, great, because there's some.
Okay, will do.
Okay, so I'm waiting for you to mute everyone, then I will have a few words.
All right, Demet, you want to?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Actually, what I would like to say shortly is we are running a zUniversity program here in Turkey, along with 2 other countries in our region, the South Africa and Saudi Arabia. So we have brand new colleagues from, quite like right out of universities, most of them. And they are very new to the mainframe environment. They've been getting lots of education on the classical, what we call the legacy Zowe stuff. They've seen the interfaces. They've learned about the different components. Of course, as we all know, it's not a very good first image we have with our 3270 interface, but I think Zowe is right on time for this. Our new colleagues, they will also be spending some time at customer sites, like they will be spending half their time at customer site. Some of them already started actually, and those customers as well are getting new graduates all the time to their mainframe groups. So they are also interested in interfaces like Zowe. That's why I think it's very valuable that we give these educations and they can start anew, because old system programmers tend to be, keeping to their, keeping to what they are used to. So I think new system programmers will be much more interested in Zowe and what it can provide. So last week we had an education, a technical education on how to configure and bring up Zowe. But I also think it's very valuable, since it's an open source project, that we learn how we can contribute to it, because especially at the customer sites, there may be use cases where we don't already provide some Zowe functionality interface, and they can maybe develop and contribute themselves. So this is where I'm coming from. And thank you very much for doing this.
Great. Well, we're happy to speak with you all, and we look forward to growing this community and look forward to having you all participate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sujay and Mike to kind of kick off how you can contribute to Zowe.
Thank you, Tim. Let me start sharing real quick. Okay, so we're going to talk mainly about how to contribute to Zowe today, but we will actually also touch a little bit on the basics of Zowe, why we got started, and the reasons for folks to actually get interested in Zowe and start contributing as well. So before we get into that topic, just a little bit about ourselves. So Mike, if you don't mind, a quick intro about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Sujay, and thanks everyone for joining the call. I'm Mike Bauer. I'm the Zowe CLI squad lead. I've led dev teams to build Brightside as a bridge between mainframe tools and modern DevOps tools. And before my experience on the CLI, I worked as a full stack developer on traditional mainframe system applications with a lot of experience building out graphical user interfaces for those applications. And I've been working on the mainframe for about 4 years, and I work for Broadcom based out of the Pittsburgh office. Go Pens.
Thanks, Mike. And I'm Sujay. Similar to Mike, I've been working on the mainframe since 2010. I've done a lot of kind of operating system level assembler, high level assembler coding, C coding, and then I also got a taste of a lot of web development type coding as well. Internally, I was lucky enough to lead a couple of teams who were working on mainframe software, but along the way, they also adopted a lot of kind of modern industry standard DevOps principles. And because of that, we really got into the habit of marrying today's modern DevOps tools with mainframe development, which kind of led to our own involvement in Zowe. And then, of course, I'm also involved actively with the Zowe onboarding squad as well as the CLI squad. And then in my day job, I'm usually just evangelizing Zowe with some of a lot of our enterprise customers. So that's enough about us. So here's what we'll cover today. We'll talk about some basics of Zowe. Then we'll talk about contributing to Zowe versus exploiting Zowe. So there's a nuance and a difference there. And then we'll continue on with how would you actually become kind of like an expert pro level contributor in Zowe, how you would start out as just somebody coming and joining Zowe just for from the beginning, and then all the way your experience into becoming sort of an experienced person in Zowe. Some current Zowe repos of interest, and then how to actually get started with becoming active and engaged. So starting with our basics here. So Zowe was started by IBM Rocket Software and CA or Broadcom now last year. And we announced Zowe, launched it at Share in St. Louis in 2018. It got a really good reception there, and we were in open beta up until February of this year, but we went out with our GA release, and now we actually have our version 1.1, which just went GA on April 3rd. I've also got this map up here. You know, Share was where we announced it last year in St. Louis, but because of the interest that the audience had there in that conference, they actually dedicated a whole roadmap for Zowe in the subsequent Share, which we just had in March in Phoenix. So just a lot of growing interest. Again, in terms of number of folks who are engaged, 800 people engaged in our Slack community, 2,500 plus downloads since we went GA, as well as the beta downloads from before that. And of course, from a licensing perspective, we're EPL Eclipse license 2.0. Now, if you're interested, I would welcome you to read more about the EPL 2.0 license. But in a nutshell, it's an open source license, which is very friendly with enterprise and commercial tooling. So large organizations are well aware of the EPL 2.0 licensing, and they generally see it as something that can be commercialized for enterprise use. So that's a little bit of the basics. Now, you know, there's plenty of reasons I can give for why we're focused on the mainframe and why we need to modernize it the way Zowe is tackling it. But, you know, this was telling for me. I was at Share last year, and one of the folks there, speaker Mark Wilson, he actually shared this statistic where he said there are about 1.3 million Kix transactions processed per second. And just for comparison, look at some of these numbers on the right here. There's maybe 7,000 tweets per second, 30,000 Facebook likes per second, and 60,000 Google searches per second. Now compare that with just the scale of this. It's just an entirely different scale, right? 1.3 million Kix transactions per second. That is the power of the mainframe, and honestly, like the transactions that we've got happening today, there's no other platform that's capable of handling it with the same level of efficiency and scalability as the mainframe. So it's here to stay, and it's our job to sort of modernize it and keep it going. Now, very quickly, I don't want to get into the details here, but just at a very high level, basic level, what is Zowe from a technical perspective, the different components that are there. Okay. There are a few microservices that we've built out in Zowe that kind of act as the foundation of a lot of the front end capabilities that we have. Some of these allow you to access data sets on the mainframe. Some of them allow you to access jobs on the mainframe, all through REST APIs. There are also some existing REST APIs on the mainframe that we connect you to, but all of these microservices, all these REST APIs are going to be integrated and flowing through the single mediation layer that runs again on ZOS on the mainframe. This is a Java-based gateway, catalog, and discovery service, which sort of makes the mainframe more cloud-like, where these microservices, as they come up on ZOS, they're discovered and they'll appear on a catalog in the mediation layer. And then through the mediation layer, there's two clients that access all these services and make it more consumable for the users. Now, one of the interfaces is a command line interface. That's something that you would install on your machine, or maybe on a server where you have Jenkins running, and it's essentially a client-side CLI into the mainframe platform with a lot of plugins available. The plugins allow you to interact with a lot of services that are running on the mainframe. So, for example, within Zowe for the CLI, there's a plugin for DB2. There's a plugin for CICS, and there's one coming soon for IMS. And then, of course, many vendors are going to be building plugins for their own products that run on the mainframe as well using the CLI. Over on the web desktop side, this is more of a graphical interface, and actually using a lot of the same APIs that are used by the CLI to give you a visual interaction on a browser through which folks can come in, log into your browser, and you now have a graphical interface through which you're interacting with the platform. Similar thing, so you'll be able to access jobs, files, and then of course it has the same plugin functionality where both within Zowe we'll be building more and more plugins into the web desktop, and other vendors are also open to building their own plugins to integrate their products in as well. And then, one of the sort of a fun project that we did then, and it was released through Zowe, was a Visual Studio Code extension for accessing mainframe datasets, as well as being able to submit jobs. And that extension is actually built on top of the CLI. So right now, these are a few of the core components. Again, this could expand at any time, and with folks like you guys from colleges coming in, we'd welcome expanding this out even further. Okay, so moving on from the components of Zowe, if I were to give you one place to start on being able to contribute and kind of just getting a feel for what we're up to in Zowe, it would be just our repository. So go to github.com/Zowe. You don't need to even have an account. You'll be able to see this page as I've got here, and you'll see which repositories are really active on here. So feel free to kind of just navigate to this URL and take a look at what repos we have within Zowe. I do know there's quite a bit here, so I'll highlight a few repos that are of particular interest today. The API mediation layer that I was talking about, that repository is under Zowe/API-layer. You'll see in most of these, you'll see that if you go to issues, there's quite a bit of GitHub issues that are listed on there. Maybe there's one that interests you, or if you've been using one of these tools, the CLI or the Web Desktops App Manager, you can go ahead and actually, if you have an account, just open up an issue on there, either an enhancement or maybe you've ran across some bugs. So those are different ways to really easily start contributing. Really, the barrier to entry into becoming somebody who's active in Zowe is really low. As long as you have a GitHub account, you're able to actually go and comment on these things, upvote things, as well as even open up bug reports as well. Now, other ones on here. So ZSS is the Zowe Secure Services. It's another set of low-level microservices that are running on ZOS. And of particular interest here is that a lot of folks usually ask the question of, I am comfortable with certain languages, so I like JavaScript or I like C. So I have this one on here because this actually has a lot of C code that runs on ZOS, and it's sort of a foundational microservice that's used by a few of the clients in Zowe. There's more around here. So the imperative is a framework for the command line interface. Zowe CLI is the actual command line interface code. And then Zlux App Manager is the framework that's used for displaying the UI components on a browser. Okay, so the next topic I'd like to talk about is there's been a little bit of talk about contributing versus exploiting. So let's just set that clear. So what is contributing? So when you're contributing to Zowe, that means you're improving sort of the core components in Zowe, right? So you'd be maybe writing a fix for an issue that's open on GitHub with Zowe, or you're coming up with enhancement ideas for the mediation layer, or for the CLI, or for the web GUI and the UI, any of them that are out there. And then you may also be improving some of the existing extensions. So maybe you're looking at a CLI plugin. So I mentioned that we have a plugin for CICS or DB2. Maybe you're improving those. And then, of course, another one in terms of contributing is if you have another core component that maybe we haven't even thought about yet and you want to bring that in, that's another way of contributing. So when it comes to contributing, you are either providing ideas for the community to use, or you're providing actual code that everybody can use. Now, on the other hand, exploiting is a little bit different. So let's say you're an organization, maybe you have a company who has a commercial interest in mainframe. You might look at Zowe and say, hey, I like what they're doing, and I'm actually going to build some closed source extensions, or maybe even build some products that reuse the Zowe source code. That's one way of exploiting. Another way is you might just build some plugins, right? That conform to some Zowe requirements. So maybe you build some plugins, you build some APIs or some web GUI apps that, again, not necessarily open sourced, but you might be conforming to some of the requirements that are set forth by Zowe to say, hey, this is an app, or this is a plugin that actually matches the requirements that are set by Zowe to be conformant. And then finally, you may also build some standalone products that use the Zowe source code. Now, one highlight here is that any sort of a commercial modification that's made to the Zowe source code has to be made available for Zowe. Now, that doesn't mean that the commercial modifications will actually make it to the Zowe source code, but what it does mean is that the organization or people who are making those commercial modifications, they have to make those changes available to Zowe under the same EPL 2.0 license. And then Zowe, the core committers in Zowe, will take a look at that and decide if that's something that's worthy of being included in the core code base of Zowe. Maybe, a lot of times they might be making a modification that's particular to their company, and in that case, it wouldn't really make sense to pull it into our source code. So that was a little bit of a comparison between contributing to exploiting. Now, most likely, if you're in college, unless you're looking to maybe start a company, maybe a startup or something, in that case, you might go the exploitation route. But if you're looking to just kind of get your hands dirty and get started with open source on the mainframe, then contributing is likely the way you're going to go from as a student in a college. Now, some of the benefits of contributing, you know, we're all using mainframes in our lives every day. If you're gonna use a credit card today, you're more than likely using a mainframe. It kind of goes back to giving back to the platform and making sure that as a platform it's able to thrive. Another reason is you want to share the load of maintaining all of this code, which is used by so many people in the community. Why should code be maintained by just one company? And then it kind of becomes a single point of failure, right? Where a lot of users see open source code as sustainable, because even if one company goes away for whatever reason, there's so many others that are out there as part of the community who are able to keep that code alive and going. Another reason is Zowe is quickly becoming sort of a standard for the platform. So when you make your code open source through Zowe, you stand a chance to have your code be adopted by many vendors, and it might not be just something that's used by your company or just your organization. Another reason is when you open up your ideas and share it with Zowe, you're able to actually get many others to pitch in and share their ideas as well. So if there's something that you use all the time and it's just a useful thing for you, if you share it with Zowe, others might actually add to it and make it even better. So you will reap those rewards as well. Some personal reasons to start contributing is, just the fact I shared that slide earlier, which showed the number of transactions per second for on a mainframe on a Kix environment. Just think about that. I mean, your code could potentially be running in these Fortune 500 companies with millions of transactions running per second and executing there. So that's a big impact that your code could have on the entire world, really. And then, of course, when you're contributing these high-profile open source projects, and we are under the Linux Foundation ultimately here with Zowe, there's a lot of recognition to be gained. And for me personally, putting it on my resume, saying that I've had commitments or I've committed into some parts of Zowe, that's actually a pretty big deal for just my own resume. And then as an organization, if you're seen as an organization that's actually empowering and encouraging your developers to contribute to open source, then you're absolutely increasing your reputation as well. So those are just some reasons to start contributing. And I won't go into exploiting here. So what we'll do here, we'll actually walk you through the process of how to start contributing into Zowe. And as part of this, this is me on the left, and we've actually kind of crossed our roles here, but I'm going to play the role of somebody who's a pro with Zowe. I've been contributing to Zowe and earned a lot of these badges and things. And Mike is going to play the role of somebody who's just starting out. So our acting abilities are going to be under test here. So let's see how this goes. So go ahead, Mike.
All right, thanks, Sujay. Let me just share my screen here. I need you to stop sharing your screen so I can share mine. All right, here we go. All right, can you see my screen? It should show that I'm level 1. I'm the novice.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so Sujay mentioned if there's one place he would go to get started, it would be github.com/Zowe. I would recommend that you start also at zowe.org. If you're interested in learning what Zowe is about, information on what's new in the latest release, which Sujay mentioned was delivered on April 3rd, You can find out more information here. If you're interested in learning at a high level what each component is, you can review this content on zoe.org. Also, if you want to get started in contributing, you can just click the Contribute tab and learn more about how to get involved into this space. You'll learn that the Zowe community is divided up into teams or squads. I'm the Zowe CLI squad lead, and we have specific missions and goals. And like any open source project, we're made up of both contributors and committers. There's a lot of good material on this page. So for example, community Slack channels, which I'll go into in a moment. You can look at the list. For example, today we'll go into the Zowe CLI Slack channel and we'll ask questions about the CLI and ask how we can get started contributing. But as Sujay mentioned, there's also Contribute with GitHub, and this offers a nice breakdown of the various squads and what repositories they're responsible for. And then also, if you don't have access to Slack at your site, you can get on one of these mailing lists, and you'll receive updates from Zowe. Also, there's a community calendar that you can check out, and you can just go and attend meetings that you're interested in. For example, we have a CLI Scrum meeting each day, and you're more than welcome to join that call if you want to know more about the Zowe CLI or even offer insight on how we can improve the product. All right, so to get started, I'm just going to navigate to the Zowe CLI Slack channel. So here you would just click this link and you would register here. I'm already registered, so let me pull up the Slack channel here. And if I pull back up the PowerPoint momentarily, the first thing I'm going to ask is, where can I review issues and enhancements to familiarize myself with ongoing CLI development? So how can I get started contributing into this space? So if I open up my Slack channel, I can just ask, where can I review issues and get started with the CLI?
All right. So you notice that Mike actually went to the Zowe CLI channel on the Open Mainframe Slack. So I'm a pro, so I've been working with the CLI already. So I see his message on Slack and I say, hey, that's awesome, Mike. We're happy to have you, and I'm gonna actually point him to this URL here and say, just go take a look at the Zowe CLI GitHub issues and familiarize yourself and get started.
So I see a lot of issues that are open here. I could go through and look at different ones. So I'll just pick one, for example. Here's an enhancement request to issuing shell commands. So that might be of interest to me. See the description here, just issue a ZOS Unix command and echo the output. It seems like they got some good design documentation here on what the commands would look like in the CLI. So generally, maybe I'm interested in this and it looks like a cool idea. So maybe I will, I'll go ahead and upvote this. But really, you know, I'm just trying to get my feet wet and get started. This looks like a larger effort and might be difficult for me to start on. So I'm going to go back to the Slack channel and just ask. I'll start a thread here. And I'll just ask, could you suggest an issue to get started on?
All right, got your question, Mike. By the way, you know, while we're doing this, I just want to share, we're just using the Zowe CLI channel and topics regarding the CLI as an example. Everything that you're seeing today also applies to all the other squads and all the other components that we're focused on as well. So the same will apply for the mediation layer or for the web desktop or any of the microservices as well. Okay, so I've got Mike's question, so I'm gonna say, hey, it's actually the same link. So go to that link, and then just take a look at issues with the tag that says "good first issue." So I'll send that to Mike, and hopefully he'll go look at issues that have that tag on them.
So here I see right at the top here, I see one that's labeled "Good First Issue." It's also titled "Zowe Webinar Do Not Assign." So I think that one's for me. Right. So I'm going to click this guy, and it looks like the issue is that in the help text for the CLI, it says click this link, but when Sujay clicks that link, it gives him a 404 issue here. So I'm going to let him know that I'm going to start on that issue. So let me say, I will try this issue.
Okay, so I see that he's gonna give that issue an attempt. I just want to make sure though, and tell him that just make sure that you assign yourself to the issue.
Okay, so let's get started. So I'll follow Sujay's advice, and so no one else picks up the issue, I will assign myself to the issue to pick it up. Now, as a someone who isn't a core contributor to the space, I'm not going to be able to just create a branch. I'm going to have to fork the repo. So how you would do that is you would click this button to fork your own copy of this to your account. And we see that I've already forked it. But if you hadn't, your account would appear here and you would just click on that. So if I view my fork of the code, I see that the branch is even with Zowe master, and I can go ahead and get started. And there's information in the README on how to do that. Let me pull up I'm going to go ahead and actually fix this issue on the call and go through the process of contributing that fix into the project. So let me pull up VS Code, and I've already followed the instructions to build the CLI locally. So if I ran Zowe as an example, the first step to resolving the issue is reproduce the issue for yourself. So here I'm going to notice that the period's still there. And if I do control click to follow the link, it will, it's pulling up on a different window. So here it is, page not found. So I was able to reproduce the issue. Now, again, we're just going through the process of how you would contribute this change. It's really similar for each project, but just to show for the changes I made, I'd really just remove this period and updated that in our snapshot test. That's basically what I did. Now to see my change locally, I do npm run build, and that'll build the project locally, and then I'll just show that the change was successful. Let me pull this up.
And while Mike's running that, I do want to share, the change that Mike's making here is for the command line interface, which is on the client side. So he's able to make that and test it very easily on his own. If you're working on some of the other components that do need the mainframe, you will actually need access to the OS to test some of those changes. We just happened to pick one here, which is mostly on the client side. So we didn't need to connect to the mainframe for this.
So if we look here, I see that the period's removed now that I made my change. And if I click this link, it takes me to the appropriate doc space now. So I've resolved the issue. And again, let me just pull up the name of that issue really quick. It was issue 320. All right. So 320. I'm going to commit my changes, and we sign off on our commits. So we do git commit -a-m, and I will do resolve issue 320 and sign off and git push. And again, this is just in my forked repository. So now that I've pushed my changes to master of my own fork, I'm going to open a PR. So let me just go to branch, create pull request. And here we see that I am merging from Mike Bauer CA, Zowe-CLI, into Zowe/Zowe-CLI. So that's good. I'm going to create the pull request. This is fine for the title. I'm going to create pull request here. It's able to be merged. And now a bunch of checks will run. So we have a DCO check that makes sure that you've signed your commits and verified them. That was what the -- sign off flag was toggled for. And then we also have pipelines that will run so that we're constantly making sure that every pull request that's open passes all our integration and unit tests, as well as our linting tests and such. And I'll actually step out of the part I'm playing momentarily, and because likely if you're new to the space, you want to have access to actually view this pipeline. But I do, and I just want to show a little bit of this running. So you can see that the pipeline's running, and I just want to show this so that the community and folks using our code can have confidence in that we're continuously testing our code and ensuring that not just any commit is making it into the process. After this pipeline runs, we also perform someone is assigned the pull request and performs a code review as well. So there is a human element to ensuring everything is good that's making it into Zowe. So I guess I'll pause here for a second while this is running and ask if anyone has any questions on the process so far.
Mike, I have a question around microservices. So can you elaborate what that means, just to understand?
I'll take the lead. Sure. Hi, this is Sujay. So microservices are a method through which you can build API services. If you're aware of the microservices architecture, the idea is that you keep the services as small as possible. So that the impact of making changes to it, or if one breaks down, there's not much over reliance on one microservice. So that's the concept of a microservice, is just a way of building APIs using sort of some architectural and guidelines. Now, within Zowe, we have a set of microservices that we've got built out. So, for example, there's one that allows you to access data sets on the mainframe, and that's called the Zowe Explorer APIs. Likewise, there's one for accessing jobs on the mainframe. So these are a set of REST API services that are running on ZOS and through web calls from clients. So, for example, from the command line interface that Mike was showing, if you were to type out Zowe files, list datasets, blah, that's going to actually go ahead and make an API call, in that case, into a set of APIs on the mainframe called ZOSMF, and then get the data from there back to you to the screen. So those are some of the microservices that we're talking about. If you're looking for a full list, I don't currently have that, but if you could send me a quick note on Slack, I could definitely point you in the right direction there.
Thanks, Sujay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So I saw that I'll just pick back up here. I actually saw that the pipeline, it had initially failed, and it looks like it's running again. So somebody might have noticed that and kicked it off again for me. But if you ever, this is actually a good experience. So if you if you have one of these checks failed and you don't know why, you can just reach out to likely somebody who suggested on the PR reviewer, not necessarily a robot, but like Z Fernando, he's one of the contributors in the Zowe CLI space. So you can tag people in here too. So you could be like at Z Fernando, the initial continuous integration test failed. Please advise on what needs done to ensure it passes. And you can comment right on the pull request. So if you ever have any questions on why one of these checks failed or something of that nature, likely you'll see a suggested reviewer here. And if not, you can just do at Zowe/Zowe CLI or something like that, or just ask the question. Folks are reviewing here all the time. So then once I complete the pull request here, I'm going to go back into Slack. Well, let me and post. Back to Sujay that I've opened a PR that should address the issue. And then if I go back to the slide deck here, I see that I have leveled up. So now I'm up to level 5. So now I might have an idea for extending the Zowe CLI. So, and if you have an idea for doing that, I'm just going to go to issues. We'll come back and check on that PR in a moment. If you have an issue, you can just do new issue. Maybe it's an enhancement. So maybe you tab completion. It's a typical one that folks would recommend as an enhancement. You could say tab completion for Zowe CLI. I would like tab completion to be implemented so that I can use the CLI more efficiently. And you can submit the new issue. Typically, you would also want to maybe label it, if you have this ability to do, label it as a new feature or enhancement. Also a note, because I didn't do it here, for the sake of demonstration, I'll have to delete this. Definitely open issues, but if you can, take a quick look to see if something like that already had existed. So for example, tab completion, I see that it was actually down here already opened. So it'll be probably eventually closed, marked as duplicate or something of that nature. So it's good to review to see if that's in the list. I didn't do that here for demonstration purposes. But yeah, even if you don't have time to maybe go through the whole list, we definitely recommend you at least try to search for your issue, but definitely open the issue if you're unsure, and we can review it ourselves. Just make sure we get the information. So now that I've opened up that enhancement, back to the slides, I level up again. So now I'm gaining experience in the Zowe CLI code base. I'm offering my ideas and contributing into the space. And so now I asked Sujay, I'd say, I would like to join the Zowe CLI squad. Just ask him.
All right. So I see Mike's message. I'm gonna actually go. Mike's been pretty active, right? He's been closing some of the GitHub issues that we've got. He also has been sharing ideas. For example, he just opened up an enhancement request for tab completion. So I mean, why not, right? So I go and ask the CLI squad. Guys, Mike is awesome. He's been working with us all this while, giving us all these contributions. Are you okay with him joining our squad? And honestly, if everyone on the CLI squad is fine with Mike officially joining us, then that's all it is. That's all it takes to becoming somebody who's actually part of the official CLI squad. Go ahead, Mike. So Mike has joined the CLI squad, so he just continues leveling up. Now he's at level 20. He's pretty excited. Keep going. So as now that he's officially a squad member, what are some of the things that he's now able to do beyond what he was able to do just as somebody who was just joining? Now, as a squad member, he's gonna be able to participate in the CLI squad's planning activities and stand-up meetings. Not only is he able to do that, but he's actually sort of expected to join those meetings as a squad member. Before, he was actually able to attend those meetings if you wanted to, but now he's expected to be there. He's also able to contribute to some of the playbacks and demos that we do regularly every couple weeks or so, where any of the new fixes or enhancements that we worked on, Mike would be part of the team that demos those things. He also is able to participate in some of the more strategic roadmap meetings for longer term things. And then, as a part of the squad member, one of the biggest advantages is you're not necessarily going to just work on these small bug fixes or little enhancements. You're actually going to be focused more on larger undertakings as a team as well. So longer term strategic roadmap items as well. He's also able to contribute directly into the code base by branching. So you noticed in the demo that Mike did that he had to fork the CLI repo. When he's part of the squad, he's going to be added to the CLI squad's group on GitHub, and he wouldn't have to fork anymore. He's just going to be able to branch and make contributions directly. He's also able to influence the contribution guidelines, as well as you saw the continuous integration pipeline kick off there. He would also have access to that and be able to influence that as well. And Mike continues to grow in experience. Go ahead.
And then I asked, I've been on a number of calls. I want to be more responsible. I want to be responsible for the CLI code base, have the authority to, approve pull requests, merge them into the code base. So I asked for that ability. And generally here, the CLI squad would make the decision and say that, they may recognize my many contributions, and considers him as a PR approver. So then Sujay could ask the ZLC for approval formally to add myself as a core committer with pull request approval access. So now I'm a grand master of the CLI code base. Level up 30 CLI core committer.
So of course, so as a core committer, now Mike is able to actually approve those pull requests as well. So as part of the CLI squad, he was able to contribute and collaborate with the members in the squad. But now, as a core committer, he's one of the folks who actually approves pull requests and merges those changes into the master branch of the CLI. So that's the power of being a core committer there. So that was sort of a full starting from being a novice coming in with no experience and growing in experience and being able to become a core committer. So as you guys are probably aware, we are entirely meritocracy based. So it's really as the more you contribute, the more you're going to be able to participate and kind of grow as a contributor into some of these open source things in Zowe. So switching back to the slides here, let me see. Yeah, there you go. So what are some ways of getting involved? You can go to the Open Mainframe Projects website, or if you're interested directly in Zowe, you can go to zowe.org. As Mike mentioned, you can join us on Slack or via the email list as well. From a code perspective, you can go to Zowe GitHub. If you're more interested in just using Zowe to kind of familiarize yourself, from zowe.org, you're able to download all of the components there and start using it. And if you have any trouble, there's documentation on GitHub itself. And then, of course, any questions that you might have while using it or looking at the code, feel free to reach out to us on Slack. As far as extending, there are guides that are out there for extending some portions of the core components. So for example, if you're interested in building a new plugin for the CLI, or you're interested in building a new app for the Zowe web desktop, there's actually dedicated guidelines for just that. And as always, continue to give us feedback. You can open up Git issues if it's sort of a product oriented thing. If you just want to give us feedback on the community as a whole, reach out to us on Slack as well.
Sujay, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
On mainframes, we use a tool called SMP. That's what
Yes.
we call it, to install various products or apply fixes and so on.
Yep.
Okay. So, are there any microservices that can help me do this with that? With that.
Great question. So I believe, as I mentioned before, the CLI and the web desktop, they actually use a lot of APIs from ZOSMF. To me, I view ZOSMF as kind of a part of API enabling the operating system. And within ZOSMF, they are actually building in SMP maintenance functionality. It was announced at Share. That's not done as part of Zowe. That's being developed outside of Zowe as a within IBM, I believe. But we've been in discussions with them to make sure that APIs are built around those SMP maintenance capabilities. And once those APIs become available, any of us can start building CLI commands or a GUI interface into that. But yes, I believe that is on the radar to make sure that there's REST APIs available for performing SMP actions through ZOSMF.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just a little bit more links here, direct links, but that about wraps it up for us. So I'll send it back to Tim for the previous slide. Mike, if you could stop on the ecosystem slide there.
Yeah, so as Sujay and Mike mentioned in one of the earlier slides about the quick facts about Zowe, there's almost 20 plus now applications that are built on top of the Zowe framework. And so what we are doing now is we want to highlight those applications, and we want the developers and the people that are developing those applications, as well as the exploiters who are building applications on top of the framework, to share their story on how they're connecting with other Zoweans, how they're leveraging the framework. And so we are hosting a webinar series along with associated blogs and articles to give those developers that voice. And so later this summer, we're currently targeting May 8th, we want to share those stories and do something similar in this webinar. And then there's also an opportunity for new organizations to join, and they will be announced through a press release. So stay on the lookout for the ecosystem growth announcement to learn about all the different applications that are being built on top of the Zowe framework. All right.
And then these are just a few of the commercial products that have been built on Zowe. Open source is great, but for enterprise adoption, sometimes commercializing it gives it a little bit more a chance to actually be adopted by these bigger enterprises. So one of the products that was recently announced, Wazi by IBM, is using some of the components from Zowe. On the other side, Brightside is something from CA Broadcom, which was actually won the award for DevOps.com's most innovative solution. So there's a lot going on out there. Rocket has something called Blue Zone Web. So again, we're continuing to also see adoption of this on the commercial side. So the things that you guys build in open source may end up powering some of these commercial products that are up and growing and influencing the mainframe world, really. So with that, I'll conclude. So thank you for the opportunity. If you have any more questions on how to contribute, absolutely feel free to reach out to us on Slack or even on GitHub. So thanks a lot, everyone.
Great. Thank you all, and thank you, Demet, for helping to facilitate this, and the OMP, thank you again for giving us this environment to have these types of conversations.
Yes, we also thank on our side for providing this education to us. I think it was very helpful, the closest to hands-on we could ever get. So hopefully we will be contributors in the near future.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.